Fuck. Thank you. God damn. Oh, I'm so bad at this. That was me. I had my headphones muted. Um, I was saying all kind of stuff. I guess I'll redo it. I was going over the news, and two things of note was that it looks like Trump replaced Matt Gaetz with Pam Bondi as Attorney General nomination. She was the lawyer that helped him with his impeachment trial, and she was the first female Attorney General of Florida. And then Putin is thumping his chest, saying that because the U.S. and Britain allowed missiles, that we're pushing the Ukraine war to go global, and that he's gonna if we're not careful, there could be escalation. So that was in the news. And then I was talking about Alu Akbar, and I said, I know, Jeremy. I feel bad enough. Don't lay it on too thick. That's my own. I'm really hard on myself. I'm not kidding. When I fuck up, y'all think I'm mean to other people. I'm way worse on myself. It's when I grab my headphones, I grab them by the one of the ears, and sometimes my finger hits that little mute button, and I never remember to check it. Yeah, that's what I was saying. He fired some missile into Ukraine. And then I was talking about Alu Akbar, and I said, isn't that the general on Star Wars? He had like the little hammerhead shark head on an elephant trunk, and that I don't know how I even remember that stuff, but we had the action figures growing up. I was I remember I saw Star Wars, the original Star Wars, in the movie theater. I was in the first grade. That was the year my mom met my stepdad, and my stepdad took the family to see Star. I remember me and my stepbrother watching it in the theater, and we had all the little toys that go with it. Or actually, the neighbor kids had most. I didn't really collect Star Wars toys, and so I think that's how I remember the stuff. All right, Bow Dragon. As flattered as I am, I don't want that junk on my channel. Why don't we get that out of here? You could just go to bed without. Oh, yeah, I did. I did have. We had the models. I remember I had an R2D2 model that you had to put together, and they had these stickers you had to put on him for all the little different colored sections of his body. Yeah, that was like one of the first movies that well, it was like one of the first blockbusters. Jaws, I think, was the first blockbuster in 1975, and then 2 years later we got Star Wars. But that was one of the first ones that had toy, like a whole franchise spun off of it. Yeah, we had the Jawa. We didn't have the Sandcrawler, but we had the little Jawas. And when I say we, I mean collectively between everybody in the neighborhood. I don't know if I actually had a Jawa. I don't think I had any of that. And they had that like dinosaur camel thing that they would ride on. I went back and rewatched the Star Wars trilogy few weeks ago, and it really holds up well. It was way better than I remember it actually. A lot of nostalgia. That was kind of a defining moment for Gen X, I guess. That was I would say Gen X, like modern Gen X culture, starts about 1976, and Star Wars was 77. You had the CBGB scene, then and Britpunk, Star Wars, all of that happened around the same time. Also, Dungeons and Dragons and video games. 1978 was Space Invaders. So those few years around the first Star Wars was when the cultural changes that were happening in those couple of years, you can still trace to this day. There's still versions of that culture going on to this day. So I think it laid the foundation for a lot of modern culture, and that was mostly developed during Generation X. No. Who is Sam Walker? Yeah, the I was a first edition D&D nerd, and Monster Manual was the first volume. It came out in late 1977, and I'll tell you what else came out at the same time was that Rankin Bass Hobbit cartoon that they would show on TV once a year that I love, and I still think is the best version of Lord of the Rings yet, and one of my favorite cartoons ever. Yeah, all those years. 78, 79, because that's when punk started to split off into its post-punk um, successors. Goth rock, hardcore, new wave. Yep. Because we got our Atari in 1982 for Christmas. And then 1983 was the year of the big video game crash, where all of a sudden people stopped buying video games. And so we came just the end of it. But we had a neighbor, I think in 81, that had the paddle version of the Atari with the Pong game. That's all they had was Pong. And we'd go over to their house and we'd play Pong. And we thought it was the most exciting, fascinating thing happening in the world at that time. Oh, Sam Walker, the Sandcrawler. I was about to look it up. Like, is that what part did he play? Is that one of the actors I don't know about? I don't know about the D&D cartoon. That one might have to stay hidden. I was so disappointed in that one, and that was at the tail end. That's when I was leaving D&D. It seemed like I spent my whole childhood playing D&D, but when I look at it, it was actually about a year or a year and a half. And I was so excited for that D&D cartoon. And when it came on, I was so disappointed in it. It was our actual D&D games were way more exciting than anything I saw in that cartoon. And they had that little unicorn, Uni. Yeah, and that was the Christmas that I'm sure everybody's heard this story before, but in 7th grade I decided to homeschool myself. I was so bored at school. I was being bullied by the kids. There was no reason for me to be in school. So I would just not go to school. I would wait for all the rest of the family to leave the house. I would leave the house in the morning because I left first. And I would pretend to walk to school, but then I would cut down this little back alley around to the backyard, and I would crouch down behind this bush with my book sack, and I would wait for everybody else to leave the house. I'd wait for my siblings to walk to school. I'd wait for my mom and stepdad to get in their big station wagons and go to work. And then after everybody was gone, I would crawl out from behind the bush, and I would walk back into the house, and I would watch PBS, educational television all day long, and I would do art projects, and I would read encyclopedias, and I was getting way more of an education homeschooling myself than anything I was learning at that little junior high school they had me going to. And so that was about the time. It was about we were coming up on Christmas. It was about that time of year, and I remember that the Atari was under my stepdad's bed, and it was wrapped already, and I knew it was under there. So every day when I would do my my homeschooling thing, I would go under the bed and I'd get the Atari out and I would carefully unwrap it, and I would pull it out of the box, and I would unwrap the little video games. They had the adventure game with the dragons. That was one of my favorite. And I would hook it up to TV and I would play it. And I would play the games. And then I would put them back in the box, and I would carefully tape the wrapping back over the box. So I got to play the Atari weeks before the rest of the family. I don't even know if my family knows this. If you're watching, yeah, that's what happened. In fact, I'm not going to try to show it now because I'm on my phone, but I actually have a picture of me. opening the Atari for Christmas, and I had to pretend to be surprised and excited. So it's me holding the Atari, like smiling into the camera in in delight and surprise that ooh, Santa brought us an Atari. I can't wait to play all these games. I was a bored gifty. What you gonna do? Commodore 64. Yeah, I had friends with the Commodore 64, and they would play. What's that game? Zort. Zort. It was a text game. It was like you're exploring a dungeon, and you have to type what you do next, and then the game tells you what you see. And you have the whole game was figuring out exactly what words or phrases to type. Really, and they had the Apple Macs too. And I remember in the gifted class we had a Radio Shack, a TRS-80, where you had to load the programs up with a cassette recorder. They were on cassette tape, and you had to play a tape for like half an hour. And so it would cut into our class time just loading the program into the computer, and we would play. There's a game called Pyramid, which is like a dungeon crawl, a text-based game. And one of my favorite ones, which should resonate today with a lot of you, was this game called Eliza, and it was this fake psychologist lady, and you would type to her, and she would like type things back. She had these program phrases that she would say back. So you would tell her your problems, and she would say like, that's very interesting. Tell me more. And when I'm using the AI, the Chat GPT, when I first started using it, I'm like, this is just like Eliza. Reminds me of that Eliza program we used to play back in the 80s. She was like an AI therapist. I don't remember Wishbringer or Cutthroat. Wasn't there Oregon Trail? Wasn't that one of the games too? I think I played that one a little bit. They had it in the gifted class, and then my friend, who was a computer nerd, had one at his house. So every time I'd go spend the night at his house, we would get to play those computer games. But all we had at my house was an Atari. That was like we were like a little more poor than most of my friends. So a lot of the cool Gen X stuff I got through staying over at my friend's house more than we never had cable growing up. My mom had this thing where she refused to pay for TV. I'm not paying for TV. I'm not paying for TV. When I start having to pay for TV, that's it. We're just not going to watch it anymore. She just had this block against paying for TV. And so we never got cable. So I'd have to watch MTV and all the cable shows at my friend's house. Let's see, the glow-in-the-dark stone. I'll have to check out Wishbringer. It sounds cool. I don't remember that one. Those were my yeah, but that was all back in the D&D days, all around the same time. That was peak nerd for that time period, and I was one of them. Not only was I a D&D nerd and a computer nerd, I was also like a philosophy nerd and a classical literature nerd, which I've had the debate before about the difference between nerds and geeks. And I guess I would call D&D and the computer stuff the geek side, and the book stuff the nerd side. So even among the geeks, if you were too like book nerdy, you were just a different kind of nerd. And I was both. That's one reason I got bullied. I think I got bullied more for being a nerd than I did for being gay, except in PE class. All right, I'm going to look it up. Wishbringer. Let's see. Wishbringer. It was on the Commodore? Oh, wait a minute. This does look familiar. Yeah, I think we did have this game. And because they're text based, they're hard. They're not as memorable as the graphic based ones. I don't remember much of the actual stories. And then at the residential school I went to, they had an entire computer lab because it was on a college campus, and they had the Apple Macs and the graphic computers where you could do computer graphics, and we got to play with all of that too. But computers, believe it or not, didn't really interest me much as a kid. It's not until like I think Windows 98 that I really got into those the video games you played on the disc, the little floppy disk, like King's Quest, and there was one called, was it Heretic? And Mist and those type of games. And then that's when AOL started to come out, and I got really into. That's when my computer addiction started. I was more into like very much like today, chatting with the real people than I was into the game part. Oh, take care, Elena. It's good to see you. Um, Thank you for stopping by. I remember that you tried to come up on panel one day, so I'd still like to talk to you if that's an option. Man, you were way more of a nerd than me. I don't remember any of these games. If we lived in the same town, I probably would have been at your house all the time. Hey, Jess, how are you? What's been going on? Fargo, sort of Fargo. Let me look that one up. And that was also, yeah, I don't remember this one. Let's see. I remember the Radio Shack computer. Oh, this one had graphics to it. This one looks kind of cool. They have it on Steam. Um, that's when you had to know BASIC just to even use a computer. They didn't have anything pre-programmed into it. So if you wanted to get it to do anything like print out something or run a basic calculation or anything, you had to know how to communicate with it in BASIC. So I do know a little bit of BASIC. And then what was the other one? We had to learn later. Fortran, COBOL, something like that. Computers got so much easier when all you had to do was turn on a button and fire up Windows and AOL. Load. Oh, that's how, because they had, the Commodore had software to go with it, right? Because I remember the Radio Shack, it was the cassette tapes. And unless you had a cassette tape to preload a program, then you had to instruct it to do everything in BASIC. Yeah, I mean, I don't mean to be a dick about it or real cocky or anything, but I really think Gen X grew up in the best time ever. We were right on that cultural cusp of the future. The artistic future, the technological future, the cinematic future, the musical future, just all of it. We hit that right zeitgeist just at that moment. And I think that spirit just infused us. That is the one thing that might convince me that there's a God. or at least some kind of cosmic meaning to everything beyond just gross materialism. It's just that precise coincidence of just being positioned right there, right at that moment, and having everything just harmonize from there. Well, I don't know. I'm what's called a gifted underachiever. In fact, there used to be entire Facebook groups for people like us. I wasn't one of the overperformers. If I was really into it, I overperformed. But if I wasn't into it, I usually just I did just enough to get by, which was easy. When you're gifted, that's very easy to do. You're really good at doing just enough, and then so when you get to college and stuff, and they give you the actual challenging stuff, sometimes you're not prepared for it, and you struggle to catch up. But like books or music or movies or stuff like that I was really into, I dove into head first, just poured my whole self into. I read every book I could get my hands on. I listened to all the cassette tapes that I was interested in. Like if I heard a song I liked on the radio or I saw a video on MTV, I had to have everything that artist ever did. I was a completist. I had to have the whole collection by the whole artist. Or if I found an author I liked, I had to read every single thing they've ever written. And I'm still kind of like that today. And so if it caught my interest, then I did deep dives into it. But if it did catch my interest, I just skimmed the surface. Let's see what's it. He's going to be cocky here. Let's see the cultural cusp. Right? Yeah, we were the last play outside generation, so we got all the benefits that come from exploring on your own, working out things among yourselves as the kids. And then we got the rest, the other half of our life, we got to see the beginning of the internet, and we got to get adjusted to internet life. So we have the full range of experience. And then the millennials come along, the matrix generation, and they're already trapped in it. That's why I think Gen X is the generation best positioned to lead everybody else into the future, because we have that experiential base to draw on that the succeeding generations got way less of. So there's a lot of wisdom that comes from that. That's one of the things that this channel is dedicated to. In addition to men's mental health, I would say it's bringing the Gen X wisdom to the millennials and the future kids. Yeah, I mean, is it a prison though? I'm trapped in it myself. It's a prison with the door is wide open. It's like when we were living me and Mike in Vegas, our home that we built together, we called it the Oasis. And Mike would always say to me, he'd called it my gilded cage. He said, "There's no lock on the door, that I'm free to leave at any time, but that it's his goal to make me never want to leave." And so we built just such a cool life together that I voluntarily wanted the prison. And I think that's kind of what this digital life is like. There's no lock on the door, but there's something that keeps us imprisoned there anyway, or keeps us from leaving. But mine partly is just my location. There's just no incentive. There's no alternative to the digital prison. But when I'm back home in Louisiana, there's so much active social life there that it's very easy for me. When I visited last year, I had a really nice balance between the internet. I still did my show every day. I still had different online communities I was part of that I participated in. But between that, I had all of this in-person activity to do. And it felt very healthy. It felt normal It felt good having a balance of real life people and then internet people. And I could switch back and forth. When I needed a break from real life, I had the internet people. When I needed a break from the internet people, I had plenty of real life activity. That was the ideal for me. And that's what I'm having a hard time replicating here because the social climate is so opposite to the type of people that I feel like I could form that with. Yeah, I did a Gen X Film Fest about a month or so ago, and I watched a bunch of Gen X movies. And one thing I determined is The Matrix seems to be the cutoff point for that was the divide between millennials and Gen X because in 1995 we had the movie 12 Monkeys, which to me was far, far superior to The Matrix. So that was like the Gen X version of The Matrix. And then you get to the actual Matrix in 1999, and I could see the difference in style, themes, um, just everything. So I use 12 Monkeys in The Matrix as the divider between who's Gen X and who's Matrix. If you prefer The Matrix to 12 Monkeys, chances are you're millennial or at least millennially oriented. And if you're a 12 Monkeys guy, that marks you as Gen X. I hated The Matrix. I hated the acting, the writing, the script, the plot, the themes, the aesthetics of it. I have a hard time finding a single thing about that movie that I liked. I think we did a stream or two discussing it a while back, me and Joe. Yeah, every time that's one of those classic movies that every time you watch it, that's how I could tell a really good movie. Because if I watch it 5 or 10 times, do I see something new in it each time? Is there another layer there for me to see on each rewatch? And 12 Monkeys definitely passed that test. Matrix, I could barely get through once. I've watched it twice by now because I rewatched it during the film fest, and I think that's about all I could take of it. If you want to like hostage torture me, just put me in a room and force me to watch The Matrix. I'll tell you anything you want to know. Just please don't make me watch it again. Yeah, Elena, Fight Club 2. Absolutely. That was 1999. I think that was peak postmodern filmmaking. There were so many. In fact, I thought about doing a film fest on just the year 1999 alone. Part of the Gen X Film Fest was working up to the year 1999. And Fight Club is definitely one of the movies that I think is that's at the very tail end of Gen X. I think that's Gen X. That's the one century transitioning into the other. Let's see, New Orleans. Yeah, New Orleans is an interesting city. I've always said that I think everybody should see it once. It's like no other city in the U.S. It's a lot of it's changed. If you're a tourist, you're not going to notice the changes. Just stick to the tourist areas, the French Quarter, Uptown. You'll be fine. And the cool thing about New Orleans is it's not that big of a city, and it's built along the river, so it's linear. They call it the Crescent City. So you could start at one end, like take the Bywater neighborhood. You could start at the Bywater, go through the Marigny, the French Quarter, downtown, uptown, all the way to I don't know Audubon Park, and you can just make a day of walking from one end of the city to the other, basically just down one or two streets, and see most of what there is to see in New Orleans. And the food, the best food in the entire United States. Like, if you can find better food outside of New Orleans, let me know. That is where America goes to eat. Yep, I would. Hang on, where's the I would chalk you up as Gen X because I think all this stuff is cultural. I don't go by the strict timeline. I go by what resonates culturally and psychologically with people. So you probably have a Gen X cultural orientation. Oh yeah, Jeremy, I remember you talking about Silo. I might check it out. I don't know much about it. Let me look it up. That's when it's a sci-fi series and they live in a silo. Dystopian drama, they call it. What network is it on? That's going to determine. Oh, it's Apple TV. Apple TV is very hard to find unless you're a member. It's very hard to find alternative platforms that stream it. Yeah, in fact, we were talking about it the other day, Zitz. You're what's called a zennial, which is the cusp between Gen X and millennial. But also, they have what's called zennials, which are the cusp between millennials and Gen Z. So on the other end, so you have zennial on one end of the millennials, and you have zennials on the other end of the millennial. Which is that right there is so millennial right there of a concept. Oh, so far it's just Jeremy talking, uh, and you check if your top chat thing is toggled. You might be considered the top chat, so it may only be showing your comments. And then Elena was chatting a little bit earlier, but it looks like that's about all that's chatting right now. Oh, I just noticed I didn't get my big vertical TikTok audience at the beginning. Usually the numbers shoot up a little bit for a couple of minutes before they decide, oh no, this stream's not what I thought it was. Let me swipe. There was one that we watched in the Discord earlier this year, called After Party. It was a murder mystery series, and it was kind of silly, but the cool thing about it was each episode they would interview a different suspect, and the suspect would recount the events in a different style of filmmaking each time. So some like one suspect would recount it as a rom-com, another one would recount it as an action movie, another one would recount it as a cartoon. And so it was the same events, but seen through the subjective eyes of each character. And it kind of showed how we all have this subjective version of reality that we filter everything through. We all have our own mind movie going on in our head. So 10 people could witness the same event, but have a different movie about that event. In fact, I want to see if I watched the first 2 seasons. I want to see if maybe they did a third one. My we had one of the community members that he had all these fancy ways of getting free shows, and so that's how we were able to watch the Apple TV stuff, but I haven't been able to find it on my own. I haven't had much luck finding the Apple stuff. Nope, they only had 2 seasons. Dark Matter, why does that sound familiar? Oh, and Zents. I started watching Moana. It was pretty good, except for, oh my God, I hate musicals. God, every time they bust out singing. I guess that's when I can take my pee breaks, get my refills. But it was way better. I was not expecting to enjoy Moana as much as I am. I'm about 30 minutes in. The animation or the graphics are very cool. I love the scenery. I love that little island they're on. The characters are a little more three-dimensional and less cartoony than I expected them to be. The fact that it's a female lead is not annoying me at all. Like I'm able to connect with her and enjoy her character. I can definitely tell the storylines, the themes that they're setting up are ones that I relate to. and that I preach on here a lot too, about being yourself, taking risk, all of that. So yeah, other than the singing, oh, and I love the grandma. I had a crazy. I'm a grandma's boy. I didn't really get along with either one of my parents. My grandmother is the one I had the connection with, and she's the one that raised me, like psychologically. And she lived across the street from us, so I could always like go to her house and access her and talk to her when I needed to. And so she was a very formative figure in my life. Like I am the person I am today because of my grandma, and she was a crazy grandma, like the one in the movie. She was just so fun, so silly. She was a free spirit. She did her own thing. She didn't care what anybody thought, just like the grandma in the movie. So yeah, I might even finish that one tonight too, and I'll see if I can find a free copy of Silo. In fact, I'm looking right now. Apple's pretty good at having their stuff locked down. Oh, yeah. I think people that I love grandma's boys, grandma's children, and I think people that had a cool grandma are so fortunate. I think that's the absolute two best things about my life. I'm one of these people that didn't have an awful childhood. I had an actually pretty good childhood, and so it made adulthood a lot harder. Like everything was downhill from childhood, and that's the disadvantage of having a magical childhood. But the the absolute best things to ever happen to me, and they're the reason today that I'm probably not dead or in jail somewhere, is I was born Gen X at the exact time that I was, and my grandmother. And those two influences helped form me in all of the positive ways that I am today. I didn't have a lot of adversity to overcome, and I had those positive influences at the time that I needed them most. And I think that made all the difference. And that's why I tell people to this day, if you have young problem children, get them, find them mentor, find whatever's working in their life, find the positive influences, whatever's going to tip their development in a positive direction, and invest in those. Keep reinforcing those. If it's a relative, a teacher, a grandmother, if they're into some computer game or movie or book series that's helping them develop positively, put your energy there. That's what's going to make the difference. That positive acculturating force, that second factor in the Dabrowski model. Yep, yep. Even in some cases, even a first mom. I Me and my mom had a very tense relationship. She was not prepared for a kid like me, and my grandmother seemed to know exactly what to do with me. She knew how to talk to me. She knew how to communicate with me. I could listen to her and understand her. Me and my mom just did not have the rapport that she needed to be able to parent me. She was good at providing the physical stuff like shelter, food, that kind of stuff, but the psychological stuff, she just did it. Not her fault. Like I would be a challenge for most parents, I think. Yeah, and I grew up with a lot of old, like my grandma and all her friends. She always had they were always like having cookouts, and all the old people were always hanging out at her house. And so I grew up around a lot of elders. And one of my favorite things to do as a kid was just to listen to their story. I loved hanging out with the old people and listen to their stories, and they would laugh and kind of. The old people were having the best time of anybody growing up. And I kind of idealized old age, and I'm like, wow, one day I'm gonna get to be like them. God, I hope I'm having that much fun when I'm old. And so getting to be old, getting to be that age seemed like an achievement. and a good thing to strive for, instead of like, oh no, old age is such a terrible thing. I want to avoid it as much as possible. It even as a kid, I was like looking forward to embracing old age because of all the cool old people around me. And to this day, I get along with old people probably better than my own peer group. Every job I've had working with old people, like at coworkers, I'm usually getting along with the older coworkers. Oh, right. Yeah, I forgot about the Scorpio element too. The Scorpio babies. Was it just you and your brother, or were there other siblings involved too? And another thing I think that made it hard for my mom is she, male. We were males. I'm the oldest of four, and I have a sister and two brothers. And she was really good with my sister. And so her and my sister had a bond early on, and they had a very good relationship. But none of the boys had that with her, and she definitely parented one way with the boys and a very different way with my sister. And she just was not good at parenting male children. She just did not know how to parent males. And we all of us ended up having to find alternative parents. Both of my brothers ended up living with their fathers, and I ended up at the residential school with a lot of positive male mentors. So in a way, I guess it was an opportunity for male figures to step in where needed. But my mom on her own um, did not seem very adept at parenting males. Grandma, did your grandma did she live close by? Like, did you have a lot of access to her? I won the grandma lottery. I just got the coolest grandma in the world, and actually, I double won it because my dad's mom was a cool grandma too. I was very close to both of my grandmothers, so I really can't complain about my parents because I got well compensated with alternative parents. Oh, okay. Like, was that between mom and dad or mom and grandma? That, that's another thing. Like Gen X was almost the generation of the. They call it broken homes, but to me, they broke for a reason. I don't think it was necessarily a bad thing in my case, but we were like the divorce generation. We were the latchkey generation. We were the generation that had to raise ourselves, had to make do with maybe only one parent or a parent that was overworked, not always in the home, absent parents. We had to find alternative parents. And I think the later generations are much more structured and organized. Like their lives are much more, they have intact homes. Um, they have two parents. They have their day is structured. They have after school activities, structured play. They have screen time that which is more of a structured experience. We were kind of the lost generation. Man, welcome to the club. Oh, Axis. I'm very sorry to hear that. Oh no. Did that all happen yesterday? How are you doing? I know that's rough. I'm feeling for you right now. Wow. I'm sorry about Rat Rat too. Um, the little I got to meet of him, I know he was very special. There were many times when he showed up on a stream, and it definitely had an impact on the stream. He had a certain energy to him. As odd as this is for you, um, there you go. Very sorry. Let us know if there's anything we could do. I know it's rough, and I also know that you you've been through the shit. So you'll probably come out of this one too. It's just one more crisis. Um, Rat was his pet rat, and he would have it on stream sometimes. In fact, he had his own little camera he'd put him on, and he'd have his own little separate StreamYard window. It's definitely a loss. Well, I've said it before. I'm as crazy as YouTube gets, and the panelverse and all the trolls and all the psychopathology you see on here. I'm still glad that there are spaces on YouTube that people can go to when they when like for stuff like this. It's not all bad. I think YouTube has the potential to be a benevolent force in people's lives, and so we're here for you as much as we can be. Well, I'm still trying to find that find a silo episode. I'm also looking up the Mackinac Bridge. Looks pretty cool, actually. It looks like a bridge you would see in Europe. Yeah, no, I don't know. I don't think he's faking. In fact, I did the Halloween stream, and I think Rat made an appearance. He was on, so he was around very recently. Yeah, that's a beautiful image. I like that, Zince. Oh, I intend to, Axis. I'm pretty determined. It's been rough, but part of it is I was watching that Nietzsche documentary today. Hey, Bex, and the part of Nietzsche's part of his project, at least earlier in his philosophy, was how to find meaning in suffering. Like if because he was very influenced by Schopenhauer, and if life is suffering and all suffering, so Schopenhauer is a pessimist. He didn't see much point to life at all. And Nietzsche just was trying to find some kind of positive to life, even within suffering. And one of the things that he came up with was that if you have a goal that's worthy and you pursue it, it's the pain and the suffering that you have to go through and overcome in pursuit of that goal actually is part of the pleasure and sense of achievement you get from achieving the goal. So a goal without suffering, without obstacles, without challenges is less fulfilling ultimately in the long run than having a goal where you do have to face adversity to achieve. And so that's kind of how I see this stream too. I see it as a worthy goal. And I know there's going to be challenges and suffering in the process. And instead of getting discouraged and shying from that, I embrace it as part of the pleasure that comes from pursuing that goal. And I could trace that directly to Nietzsche. Oh, Mackinac. Oh, it's not. See, this why I can't go. I can't go to Michigan. I would. I would fare just as badly here as I do there. Although growing up, like in my 20s and stuff, and being from the South, every single time I would meet somebody from Michigan, they were the coolest people in the world. Like Michiganders, is that what I would call them? They have a very specific personality that I would recognize as, because your early 20s is when you like leave your existing culture and you start to branch out. I lived in Austin, Texas for a little while. I would go to Houston and New Orleans and the different cities. So you met people outside of your regional cultural sphere. And every time I met someone from Michigan, without even knowing they were from Michigan half the time, I would just connect with them. I would vibe with them, and I would get into these interesting conversations. They were some of the kindest people. They had really warm, polite personalities. They just had this friendliness to them that was different from like a Southern friendliness. And so I recognized the Michigan personality everywhere I go. And it got to the point where I meet new people and I could tell they're from Michigan just by their personality. And so I've always appreciated people from Michigan. And I know, like during the '90s, there was a little art scene in Detroit. A lot of the bands I listened to came out of Detroit. Um, One of my favorite bands in the entire world is His Name Is Alive. It's this guy named Warren DeFever. He's about my age. I'm pretty sure he's neurodivergent. And he just did all of this really interesting, quirky music out of Detroit. He's from Livonia, actually. And through him, I discovered all these other cool bands, like underground bands that were part of the Detroit art scene. And they were always doing these cool shows, and they would like make paper mache costumes and robots. And just Detroit seemed like the coolest place on earth in the '90s. It seemed even cooler than New York City. It was very much like indie, do it yourself. They were kids my age, and they were doing all of this cool music and art in Detroit. And I was so wishing that we had something like that in my little town. Mackinac. But yeah, but I'm from I'm from South Louisiana. We don't pronounce anything right. So it's not. That's one of the things that they I think works against me up here in Washington State. Like if they're very particular. They use proper speech and articulation as a gatekeeping mechanism. So if you don't pronounce things in the proper way up here, um, I don't know. It kind of makes you a target for mockery. Yeah, and the whole point of God is dead, as far as Nietzsche goes, is that there's that was the justification, the support for the societal values of the time. So without God underpinning those values, then the values themselves become called into question. And part of Nietzsche's project was to critique those values and develop a new set of values that were more appropriate for the modern age and more appropriate for humans as they actually are and were. And he didn't get to complete the project, but um, part of his notebooks and his rough draft towards that project were some of the things that Hitler and the Nazis drew on in their philosophy. That's why Nietzsche gets associated with it, but it's a very distorted, um, partial version of what Nietzsche was actually trying to do. In fact, I'm going to run the documentary again. There's a channel in the Discord for movies, And as soon as there's enough interest and we could all coordinate a time, I'm going to show the Nietzsche documentary again because we're going to do the book club on it in a few weeks with Flow State. There's also a really good one on Socrates. I think I'm going to show in the same series. I have a bunch of documentaries on great writers and artists and thinkers. It's kind of a little pet genre of mine. So as we grow and enough interest develops, I have a whole series of those that I could, we could even do like one a week. Yeah, and another thing I appreciate about Nietzsche, because the Church of Satan, Anton LaVey, is a very Nietzschean form of Satanism. Nietzsche was one of the thinkers. I'd say probably Nietzsche might have been one of the last great classical thinkers. Nietzsche and Freud. I don't count Marx because his work is so distorted by now. But Church of Satanism is, I'd say, very Nietzschean and very Freudian. And so a lot of the values that inform my Satanism are very Nietzschean values, which Emerson was a big influence on Nietzsche as well. And most of my Satanism comes primarily from Emerson. It's Emersonian Satanism. And Emerson himself is a version of Romanticism. So you had the British Romanticism, and there was a German version of it as well. And then Emerson and Walt Whitman and that line were kind of the American version of the British Romantics, which descended from John Milton, who wrote Paradise Lost. So there's your lineage for modern Satanism. And Nietzsche is like one of the final figures in that chain that it all runs through before it gets to Anton LaVey and actual modern day Satanism with the Church of Satan in 1966. Same year of the Velvet Underground and Andy Warhol's Little Factory. So those are two very significant cultural benchmarks for my generation. In fact, I would say 1966 is the first wave of Generation X, and then 1976 is the second wave, and that's the wave that includes Star Wars and punk and all the video games, all the other stuff we talked about tonight. And then the third wave is probably, I don't know, somewhere after the death of Kurt Cobain, as it shifts toward the Matrix generation and millennials. That's where you get computers, Windows 95, Windows 98, AOL. And I think that starts the beginning of the cyber age and the information age. So I'd say Gen X is everything between those two historical points. And you have about two broad waves of them. You have the 66 to 76 and like the 76 to, I don't know, mid 90s. Here, I'll try to put the, let's see, I think it's called Geniuses of the Modern World. It's really hard to find a free version. They have a free version on YouTube, but it's at high speed, and I don't recommend it. But I think Tubi has a version as well. Geniuses of the Modern World, and there's an episode on Nietzsche. And then it's a BBC series. And then they also have Geniuses of the Ancient World, and they have one on Socrates, which I think I'm going to show pretty soon too. So a lot of these documentaries, I think, provide a good introduction into, if people want to start reading these different authors, the documentaries provide a window, like a gateway or a threshold that you can move through to start your reading. It helps kind of set the context for, and guide you to the important works if you do want to start reading. So I might start, I don't know, taking some of these authors and doing showing some documentaries, and then maybe incorporating a book club into that afterwards. We'll see how this Nietzsche book club goes with Flow State. I'm just excited that there's finally interest. I've been trying to generate this kind of interest for a couple of years now. Axis, take care. My heart is with you. Like I said, we're here for you. And just it's a process. You're going through several forms of grief right now, and just let it do its thing. Don't judge. Just kind of roll with it and keep checking in. It was good to see you. Oh yeah, well that's what we used to call it too growing up for fun. Socrates. We used to butcher all of the Greek names just for fun. To this day, I still do it a little bit. Aristotle, Socrates. We had Dr. Zeus, the Greek god with the PhD that wrote the children's books. I haven't watched, I've only seen Bill and Ted when it first came out. I saw it at the actual theater, but I haven't tried to watch it since. I love going back and watching the old classics and see how they hold up. I tried to rewatch Pretty in Pink the other day. It was pretty bad. Oh, God. Breakfast Club, classic. A year later, Pretty in Pink. I would say that's a period piece, if even that. Well, it looks like I've gone for, oh wow, over an hour. So I hit my hour mark. We may not get a panel today, but I'm satisfied. I feel like we had a good stream, and I'm feeling some completion energy. Bex, if you're out there and you want to go watch something, I'm available. Just hit me up on Discord. If not, I think I'm going to call it a night. I might go finish Moana or look for that Silo episode. And then, right. And Flo calls him Nietzsche, so I think that's going to stick. I think we're just going to call him Nietzsche. And I'll be out tomorrow. New stream time, 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific. I'm going to bump it up an hour and see if that makes a difference with drawing more viewers. So I'll see you guys tomorrow for our stream, and I'm going to go find something to watch, either in Discord with Bex or here on my own. And I look forward to seeing everybody tomorrow. Take care. Axis, again, my sympathies. It was good seeing you. Zentz, you as well. Jeremy, I always enjoy hanging out. And I'll catch you guys tomorrow. Thanks again. All right, let me figure out how to do this from the phone. There we go. Take care, guys. Appreciate you all.